Good morning, everyone. Welcome. I would like to call this meeting of the Transportation Committee meeting to order. As a reminder, this meeting is being shared virtually through Zoom for those of us who could not join us today in person and is being recorded. Committee members, please remember to turn on your microphone before speaking so that those online and in this very large room can hear you. Stating your name before speaking is helpful. Thank you. Is helpful for people joining virtually. I would like to ask committee members at the table to introduce themselves. I will start. My name is Tara Orban, and I'm representing Cook County. Scott?
Scott Hennings representing McHenry County.
Bill Barnes on behalf of CMAP.
Mary Nichols, CDOT.
Heidi Lichtenberger representing Kendall County.
Christina Kapkowski, Will County.
John Paul Diepla, FHWA.
Amy Rennell, Active Transportation Alliance.
Audrey Wennick, Metropolitan Planning Council.
Tom Vanderwood with the Northwestern Indiana Regional Planning Commission.
Heidi Files, Kane County.
Eric Llewellyn representing PACE.
Jennifer Henry, CTA.
John Loper, DuPage County.
Mike Clemens, Lake County.
Heather Mullins, Regional Transportation Authority.
David Kralik, Metro.
Henry Giroir, Illinois Tollway.
Steve Schulke, IDOT Region 1.
Tricia Noguera, IDOT OIPI.
Brandon Gaber, IDOT Planning and Programming.
Vicki Barrett, CMAP.
Thank you. There were no changes, no agenda changes requested prior to this meeting. Are there any requests for agenda changes from this committee? Seeing none, do we have any other announcements from committee members? Henry.
Yeah, just a quick announcement. The Illinois Tollways Driving Connections program has gone through public hearings. The public comment period closes on Monday, so it's pretty easy to find a link. Agencies, of course, and the public are welcome to contact us at any time. Thank you for the announcement.
Thanks, Henry. Moving on to agenda item 3.01. We have before us the draft meeting minutes from our May 29th meeting. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes as presented? Thank you, Mary. Do I have a second? Thank you. The motion is seconded. Is there any discussion on the minutes as proposed? Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? The motion carries. Bill Barnes, the Deputy of Regional Policy and Implementation, is here to provide us with an update on CMAP news. Good morning, Bill.
Thanks, Tara, and good morning, everyone. As noted, I'm Bill Barnes. I'm the Deputy of RPI here at CMAP. I'm here on behalf of Amy Lee, who typically occupies this seat. She is out of town, hopefully enjoying herself and the summer. So before we get started, I want to recognize Chad Riddle, who's in the audience, quiet and unassuming as always. District Local Roads and Streets Engineer at IDOT District 1. Today is Chad's final Transportation Committee meeting. He was telling us earlier that he remembers being in the Adams Building 21 years ago. So he's retiring next month after 28 years of service at IDOT. Chad, if you don't know him, he's an important link between CMAP, IDOT District 1, Springfield, and our local partners across the region. Over the years, he's helped communities, councils, municipal staff, programmers, and consultants to better understand the processes, policies, and practical considerations that go into advancing local roads projects. He's a steady voice of support for municipal partners and has played a key role in helping communities navigate funding and implementation. On behalf of CMAP and the Transportation Committee, we thank Chad for his years of service, partnership, and we wish him well in his next chapter. Thank you, Chad. Turning to business at hand, CMAP has recently released an updated community data snapshots, which helps local governments, partners, researchers, and residents better understand local trends and plan for the future. Snapshots are available for all 284 municipalities in the region. 77 Chicago community areas, and 7 counties, with key data on demographics, employment, housing, transportation habits, and more. This year's release includes new information from CMAP's updated land use inventory and improved community data, showing where residents travel for work and where workers in each community commute from. The snapshots also include county and regional comparisons, as well as long-term trend data across 16 key indicators. Communities can explore the data through CMAP's interactive dashboard, downloadable reports, and data tables on the Data Hub. I urge you to take a look at it. It's quite interesting what we've seen over the past few years. Moving on, I want to highlight our 2026 Technical Assistance Awards. So each year, CMAP's Technical Assistance Program, in partnership with the RTA's Community Planning Program, helps communities advance local planning priorities, strengthen capacity, and connect local implementation work on the broader regional goals in ON2 2050. This spring, CMAP and the RTA received 54 applications from 46 different applicants. The team evaluated projects based on their ability to advance the goals of assistance categories, strengthen local planning capacity, support engagement, implement previous plans, and encourage collaboration across jurisdictions. In total, 26 projects were selected, as shown on this slide. I guess that's the slide. There we go. These awards include ADA self-evaluation and transition plans, bicycle and pedestrian plans, capital improvement plans, corridor plans, local road safety plans, next plan implementation assistance, node-oriented development planning, and travel choice pilot plans. All these projects have strong transportation connections and will support communities with moving from planning to implementation. Next, this summer, CMAP recently wrapped up the 17th annual Future Leaders in Planning program, known as FLIP. This program introduces high school students to planning and how it shapes communities across Northeastern Illinois. Transportation was a big focus this year, with students learning about the Regional Transportation Plan, transportation funding, bike and ped planning, and traffic safety trends. Students also explored how transportation investments connect to broader regional priorities, including accessibility, climate resilience, community development, and long-term planning goals. Through hands-on activities, site visits, and conversations with planners and partners, students saw how planning can make streets, stations, and neighborhoods safer and better connected. CMAP thanks the students, staff, speakers, and partners who helped make FLIP 2026 a success. Turning to daily travel phase 2. So CMAP is preparing to launch phase 2 of My Daily Travel, the region's household travel survey. As you may know, we use this data to support updates to the regional travel demand model to make sure that it reflects current travel patterns across the region. The next phase builds on phase 1, which was completed last year and included responses from more than 3,500 households. That data set is now available on our data portal. Phase 2 is going to continue collecting information about how residents travel across Northeastern Illinois and will support CMAP's regional travel demand model and broader planning work. CMAP is working with its consultant RSG to begin outreach and recruitment in early August with a goal of reaching 8,000 households during this phase. The survey is expected to run through May of next year, so expect hearing about it over the course of the next few TC meetings. We encourage you all to spread the word as outreach begins so that the survey closely reflects the region's diverse communities and travel patterns. CMAP also recently completed its analysis of the enacted fiscal year 27 Illinois budget, which sustains important transportation investments, including new support for transit tied to the implementation of the NEDA Act. At the same time, the budget creates new funding uncertainty through a 6-month freeze on motor fuel tax increase and the diversion of $170 million from sales tax on motor fuel revenues, reinforcing the need for more sustainable long-term transportation funding for roads, bridges, and transit operations, all of which are reflected in the draft RTP. We encourage folks to read this analysis, which is available on our website. Speaking of the RTP, public comment closes today. It's the last day today, July 31st, to provide public comment on the RTP. It's not just the RTP, but it's also related air quality conformity determinations. We encourage all of you, including members in the audience here and those listening online, to review the materials and submit any final comments before the end of the day. There are a couple of other things for public input. As noted by the tollway, it is seeking comment on its proposed capital program driving connections, and IDOT is also seeking feedback on the Illinois Strategic Highway Safety Plan. CMAP is also hosting a public meeting to review the best ranked alternatives for improvements to the rail crossings in Berwyn and Riverside. That'll be on August 26th from 4 to 7. Notices will be sent out shortly, and there'll be information on our CMAP webpage. All these comment periods and meetings are important opportunities to help shape near and long-term transportation priorities across the region and state. Looking ahead to the future, it's important to note that we're going to have a change in location for this meeting. The Cook County Conference Room in which we are seated is going to be closed for renovations. So that's going to impact the November and December Transportation Committee meetings and your travel plans and commutes. So we want to get this out to you early so you can plan in advance. So we've made the following arrangements. For our November 18th meeting, TC will be held at the CTA's boardroom at 567 West Lake Street, which is the CTA's headquarters. Thank you, CTA. And our December 20th meeting will be not in the Cook County room, but in a Cook County building, which is 69 West Washington Street on the 22nd floor. Thank you, Cook County. Again, putting this on your radar early, but we'll update the meeting notices and continue to remind you in advance of those meetings. One final housekeeping note. On occasion, committee members are unable to attend a TC meeting. When that happens, it's easiest for CMAP to accommodate an alternate to represent your seat when they have been designated in advance. Alternates can serve in cases of both pre-planned absences as well as unexpected last-minute absences. Alternates receive meeting materials and building access QR codes just as members do, so it's helpful to ensure that we meet our in-person quorum and maintain consistency in committee operations. So make sure you reach out to us early if you know that you need an alternate. Looking ahead briefly to the agenda, I see Russ chomping at the bit. Not only are we going to hear from Russ, but we're also going to hear an update on CMAP's Transportation Resilience Improvement Plan, including near-term implementation actions, which is very timely given the unique weather patterns that we've received over the past few weeks. We're going to get an update on the Century Plan, which is CMAP's emerging regional vision for Northeastern Illinois and the priorities taking shape through ongoing engagement with partners across government, business, civic, and community organizations. And lastly, we're going to get an update on the regional freight assessment, which is currently underway and will help inform the region's understanding of its freight needs, challenges, and opportunities. Next TC meeting is scheduled for September 11. And with that, concludes my updates. Take any questions. Otherwise, we can proceed with the regular scheduled program.
Thank you, Bill. Next agenda item is 5.01. And Russ is at the podium and will provide an overview of the federal fiscal year 2023 to 2028 Transportation Improvement Program amendments.
Okay.
Welcome.
Included in your packet today are the 86 formal tip changes shown on Plan Revision 26-07 and the 292 tip changes shown on Administrative Plan Revision 2607.1 and 2607.2. As shown in the memo, formal amendments resulted in an increase of $228.3 million in total project costs for all prior, current, and future years. Here are a few highlights. There are 63 new projects that are included in this plan revision, around 25 more than is typical. All of the new projects, however, are maintenance projects. They're either resurfacing bridges, sidewalks, or there's a few IDOT projects that are actually buying buses, paratransit buses. The tip changes I present to this committee represent part of the process that links programming and project implementation. Projects can't be implemented without being in the tip, but being in the tip is only part of the implementation process. As was already mentioned, Chad Riddle has made significant contributions to the region. Most of us in the room have worked with Chad, so we all know his contributions. But I wanted to give you a bit more context to what he and IDOT District 1 Local Roads does as it relates to the TIP specifically. About 45% of all the projects in the TIP currently, about 1,100 of them, are projects that are going to be processed through District 1. Simply said, if you've ever been involved in a local project that has funding from IDOT or FHWA, Chad and his staff have been involved in getting the project to a letting. Projects going through local roads are often not the headlining big ticket capital projects, but they are the projects that keep the system functioning and are critical to enhancing and maintaining much of the region's infrastructure. Over the years, Chad has been a very good partner with CMAP as we work to improve and strengthen the coordination between District 1 local roads and CMAP. As an example, projects now need to be in the tip before the PPI form is approved by IDOT. That wasn't always the case. Sometimes consultants used to send stuff to IDOT out of the blue, and the tip was never updated. Sometimes the PLs never even knew about some of the projects. The coordination between IDOT and CMAP has streamlined this process so that all the programming, all the funding, all the paperwork is in order and things aren't coming out of the blue. Chad could tell you, we used to have projects that would come up for a letting that nobody even knew about. And we're like, where'd that project come from? And then Chad's like, now I got to accommodate this in the program. That doesn't happen anymore for the most part. The region and all of us have been the beneficiaries of Chad's professionalism, his guidance, and his responsiveness. If anyone had a question about a project or process that involved District 1 local roads, Chad is who we told them to talk to, and he was always responsive. He has, without question, been an asset and one of the key figures. And that's that term key figure is kind of banded about as a joking term sometimes. He is a key figure, and the region will be less for not having him involved. I hope that everything still keeps working the way Chad has kind of set up the system, but he is a key figure in getting things moving through this region. And it should be acknowledged that a central part of the tip goes through local roads, and they go through local roads. That means they go through Chad. And so we will be missing that key cog, and hopefully he realizes the important work that he has done for the region. Getting back to the amendment, administrative amendments increased the total cost by $696.7 million in the tip in all prior, current, and future years. The net change for total costs in the tip from all amendments resulted in $925 million being added to the tip in prior, current, and future years. Project phases moving into and out of the tip years comprised most of the formal changes, while administrative changes were primarily related to AC and ACC changes. Accounting for the amendments presented to you today, the tip remains physically constrained. The amendments were posted on July 24th for committee and public review. Approval of formal tip plan revision 26-07 is requested. And after the motion has been made, if there are any questions, I can answer them at that time. So thank you.
Thank you, Russ. I will entertain a motion to approve tip amendment 26-07. Thanks, Mike. Motion from Lake County. Do I have a second? Thank you, Christina. The motion is seconded. Are there any questions for Russ? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Up next, we have Kate Avasik to present to us an update on the Transportation Resilience Improvement Plan. As Bill said, a very appropriate topic given the recent tornadoes in the region and the extreme weather we've been seeing. So we look forward to hearing from you, Kate, on your presentation.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Kate Avasik, and I lead CMAP's Climate Resilience Program in the Regional Policy and Implementation Division. I'm happy to be back to this committee to provide an update on our Transportation Resilience Improvement Plan, or TRIP. So let's jump in. First and foremost, we completed the plan and published it this past March. I want to extend a big thanks to everyone in the room and online who helped us achieve this important milestone. So thank you. Then in April, we received final determination from FHWA that TRIP meets the minimum requirements of a resilience improvement plan under the PROTECT program. This means that projects on the priority list could receive benefits when applying for future PROTECT funding. So we are very pleased about that. And then lastly, we've integrated TRIP's findings and recommendations into the draft regional transportation plan, specifically in the Mitigate Pollution and Invest in Resilient Infrastructure chapter. So as a reminder, TRIP is the region's first roadmap to advance resilience through planning and decision-making at CMAP, transportation agencies, and local governments across Northeastern Illinois. Put simply, it tells us how climate is changing, where we are vulnerable, and then what we can do about it. It's made up of 4 components. The Climate Vulnerability Assessment provides data on potential future climate impacts and where the transportation system is most vulnerable. The priority project list details planned investments across the region that, when implemented, would increase system resilience to flooding and, in some cases, extreme heat and extreme cold. The project strategies, these highlight resilience improvements to either incorporate into transportation investments or implement as standalone projects. And then the organizational strategies, these outline ways that CMAP, transportation agencies, and other implementers can advance resilience in our collective work. So this is just a sample of what constitutes a resilience improvement. It includes everything from elevating bridges and roads to higher levels, to incorporating green infrastructure into rights of way, and modernizing transit stations to provide heating and cooling. Of course, many of these improvements are not new to anyone here. In fact, the plan showcases examples from across the region. We just need more strategic investment. Of the organizational strategies, I distilled just a few here, which include actions like, first, using TRIP's data on risk and other climate impacts into transportation or other relevant plans, incorporating resilience considerations into asset management plans and systems and investment processes, considering ways to integrate resilience throughout the project development process from the early stages all the way through, and then increasing interagency coordination and collaboration so that we can better understand and anticipate resilience needs and leverage resources. So this is just a list of all the data that we have available today for download. We have a data viewer available as well, and this data is summarized in the plan as well. The rain cloud indicates where we have scores for flooding, and then the thermometer shows where we have data on extreme heat and extreme cold in some cases. So I want to pivot to what's next. And first, I want to say we've been working to integrate resilience considerations into the Century Plan, which you'll hear more about today. We're also updating the resilience planning factor for the STP Shared Fund. And this is, first to improve the scoring methodology and better align it with TRIP's definition of what we mean by a resilient improvement. We've also been out in the region to share how TRIP's data and strategy can be used by local governments and community partners. And then we've begun to engage implementers, many of you here, to discuss priorities and where CMAP should be leading. So before I wrap up this update, I want to share a bit about what we've been hearing so far. So first, as was said, everyone in this room is very well aware of the weather that we've been having. We may have forgotten that we had a really wet spring. And of course, we have now an equally wet and torrential summer. Based on the conversations that we've had, everyone's been feeling these impacts. Even rural parts of the region that have historically maybe not had to think much about flooding issues, it's now become top of mind. Culverts are washing out, roads are flooding, and the MWRD reservoirs in Cook County reached record capacity. So we're seeing that DOTs are having to prioritize flood mitigation projects along with all of the other projects that have long been priorities in a way that wasn't true 5 to 10 years ago. One point that came up, CMAP's ability to collect data on these impacts is going to be really important for us to inform future updates to the vulnerability assessment, and can also be shared with the many entities that are involved in climate resilience planning and, let's just say, emergency response. So one suggestion that we heard is that collecting this data more frequently, perhaps following an event or maybe a series of events, could yield a better response since it's fresh in everyone's minds. Now, despite these growing impacts, we've heard time and time again, and with really good reason, that keeping our aging infrastructure in a state of good repair demands the highest priority. And so this leaves resilience and other important regional goals as secondary. In many cases, it's not that we don't know what the solutions are. It's that we need record level investment in our infrastructure, and we simply don't have the funding to meet the need at this moment. Fortunately, the act of reconstructing a road, for example, does help us modernize our drainage. It brings it up to a higher level of standard than what we have in the ground today. However, it doesn't necessarily future-proof us for the change in the precipitation that we could see over the asset's lifespan. And so that's something that we need to be thinking about more and more. Next, while we might have a pretty good understanding of the solutions, translating data on climate vulnerability and really having a firm grasp on what to do about it is something that we heard requires more work in translation. So it's one thing to point to a vulnerability on a map, but it's what is the decision tree that can help project engineering really address that vulnerability through the project development and design process. Lastly, I've been focused mostly on challenges, so I want to leave on a little bit of a more positive note with some opportunities. First, as counties are in various stages of updating their long-range transportation plans, there's an interest and opportunity in incorporating TRIP's vulnerability data and strategies into those updates, and CMAP is here to help support those efforts. We also heard interest in embedding resilience better into project evaluation processes, and similarly, we can play a role in assisting. We also heard the need for capacity building and assistance at the municipal level, highlighting the important role that programs like CMAP's technical assistance can play in advancing resilience in transportation and other relevant plans. So I'm just going to end my update with this and then open it up to discussion. As we're moving forward, we really want to continue to learn about your priorities for advancing transportation resilience, and then use that information to really help us prioritize how and where CMAP should be leading. So I conclude my update, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Does anyone have any questions for Kate? Audrey.
Thanks for that summary. Could you tell us a little bit more about how you envision incorporating resilience as a planning factor in the STP shared fund or any other funds where there are criteria used?
Yes, so it's already a factor in the current program, and we evolved the green infrastructure planning factor to become more of a resilience factor. And so the updates that we're making this time around is reflecting more fully the full suite of resilience improvements. In the last cycle, we were giving more priority to green infrastructure, or in fact, green infrastructure was eligible outright, but gray infrastructure was only eligible if it was going above and beyond the design standard, providing more, say, storage capacity in the case of a pipe or a underground storage facility. And so what we're doing now, coming out of the TRIP process, is acknowledging both the importance of green and gray infrastructure to building overall resilience, flood resilience. And what we're doing then is bringing in some additional factors to account for whether or not a project is going above and beyond the design standard and rewarding points accordingly, or whether that project is providing important co-benefits like habitat air quality and water quality.
Okay, I'm sorry, can you clarify the difference? I don't know that everybody knows the difference between gray infrastructure and green infrastructure.
Yes, thank you for the question. So gray infrastructure is the traditional stormwater pipes, culverts, anything that is collecting water and moving it, conveying it away from, say, draining it away from a roadway. Green infrastructure typically involves anything with plants like the rain garden, bump out that's shown on the slide here. It can also include permeable pavements. And I think our understanding has evolved to also incorporate some larger scale underground detention as well that can provide great flood mitigation benefits.
Thank you. Mary has a question for you.
Yeah, so you mentioned, well, thanks, Kate. That's been really helpful. I know I've had the pleasure of working with you on this throughout the process. Just to your question of where should CMAP lead, had a quick thought and then had a question too. So I know you created a file of all of the various resilience projects in the region. I think continuously scanning for opportunities and nudging us as you do when those opportunities arise is great. You mentioned the need to translate vulnerability data and resilience strategies for project engineers. Have you had a chance yet to think about how you want to go about doing that?
We have not just scratched the surface. So I think we would definitely we would welcome input on what the needs would be there.
Yeah, happy to keep talking about it. Certainly that piques my interest because I think that is a big challenge for us as a department.
Thank you.
Heidi. Thanks. It was really nice to work with you, Kate, during the development of this plan. And one of the photos that Kate showed today happened July 4th. It was a washout of one of our roads. Our maintenance team has recently been discussing how they went from a snowplow mowing operation to an emergency response disaster recovery operation. We've had so much, emergency response this year that it's really, they really have to change the way they store their equipment so it's available immediately, and it's something that we're planning the future for, and it's changing pretty quickly. That's all.
I would say the same for Cook County, Heidi. We, are very much in a reactionary mode, particularly, I know we have at least 3 confirmed tornadoes, for example, in Cook County, where a lot of our crews are assisting municipalities with many of the trees in the parkway. So just getting rid, and they're tangled with down power lines, so the complexity. So we're talking about the intensity, the frequency continues to, increase as each year goes by, each season goes by. Amy, you had a comment or question?
Thanks, Kate. This is awesome. The information is obviously very troubling, and I see how it links to the climate plan and hopefully the century plan. So I don't know if I might have some questions for you, but maybe more a statement of the challenge of our work, which is we spend a lot of our meetings wrestling with the financial pressures to maintain what we built. And so this is, additional cost to maintain it in a healthier way. But transportation is driving the climate events we're seeing, is a big driver of the climate events we're seeing. So I think what I felt was missing in the suite of solutions is just where do we decide to depave? Because the heat island effects of our impermeable surfaces are really tremendous, and making them all permeable doesn't solve all the problems. So I think just having a different framework in our minds for where is this, like that picture right there of that bus, that is a lot of pavement and a lot of concrete. Where do we not need all that? So that's just a question I don't think we know how to handle. But I think it's an important one for our future.
Thanks for the suggestion.
I agree, Amy, and I think it's something we all need to challenge ourselves to do. But the other constraint that we're up against is we do have the scarcity of financial resources, right? But we have thousands and thousands of miles of undersized pipe in the system. And as you mentioned in your presentation, Kate, the only time we get a chance to meaningfully change that is with reconstruction. And that is just such a small percentage of what's in the tip. So, how do we, as a region, even get close to moving the needle when we look at the state of good repair of our system and the financial resources needed to maintain that, in addition to, the challenge of, making our infrastructure more resilient. So it is quite a challenge. I appreciate what CMAP is doing in terms of building this data set and helping provide some imagery and real data behind what's happening collectively to everybody. And I thought you were going to chime in, Scott, but maybe I'm just stealing the mic. But one of the pictures up there was from McHenry County. You want to tell us about it?
Yeah, like Kane County was mentioning, we've got several county roads that, used to be once a decade, we'd have to close them because of flooding. The picture that was shown earlier in McHenry County was one of our county highways that has over 20,082. We had to shut it down for, I think, close to 3 weeks this spring because of the flooding that we experienced out there. So what used to be kind of a random occurrence are now being more frequent annual occurrences. So it just reiterates the importance of this plan, and thanks for all the hard work developing it.
Christina.
I just wanted to note, in talking with Katie, we've got specialized interests. When you get out into the rural areas, when you're starting to talk about farmland, you're talking about flat, very, very wealthy dirt, but the problem is it's flat. And so we have farmers that have fields that have been wet and have standing water. And we have township commissioners with gravel roads that there is no drainage. It's called a 1 foot wide bottom ditch if they're lucky, that's maybe 3 feet deep if they're lucky. They don't have a way to convey water. I was happy to be talking to Katie when I got a feasibility study from one of my highway commissioners who had a township roadway out on State Line Road that had been closed for almost 14 or 15 days because of the weather. And he has no way of doing it because he does not have the funding to replace the structures. You get out into the rural communities where you're talking township roadways. We've got township commissioners that have drainage issues that are going to cost them decades of their MFT allotments. It's not a simple fix. And so it's, how do we, yes, the urban areas, they have their own set of drainage issues and they have their own set of resiliency issues. But when you get out into the rural communities, we have different issues and there's different solutions that need to be looking at it. And it was really great to have that discussion with Katie. Katie, and know that they were looking at both, looking at it from both perspectives, because in this region, there's not a one size fits all.
Absolutely.
So
yeah, thank you for providing that perspective for everyone, because I think there's no shortage of challenges to go around for any of us. And the financial constraints are among them, and I think ubiquitous for all of us in charge of planning and programming our infrastructure. Thank you. Any other comments? Brandon.
I just wanted to kind of add a shout out. Our state resilience improvement plan is due to be released any day now. There was tons of coordination between our two projects as they're going on at around the same time, and just really appreciate the coordination, and then looking forward to how we coordinate moving forward.
That's great. Thank you.
Well, I'm sure you can tell from the response from this committee, we'll be very excited to see the state's plan, Brandon. So thank you for that plug.
It's obviously a much higher level look for a statewide plan, but certainly there's a lot of coordinated elements. Certainly flooding has been discussed at length already today. So
it's fascinating to see, even with that challenge of looking at a statewide, how the state approaches it. So thank you. Yep. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to agenda item 6.02. Tom Murtha is here to provide an update on the regional freight assessment.
We got underway. It's our first day for the transportation committee.
This work will be upgoing for next fiscal year, and look forward to this discussion and future discussions as we.
Hey, Tom,
do this.
can you turn your microphone on, please? So our folks online can hear you.
Got it.
Thank you.
All right, so let's continue on. First presentation for the freight assessment. We're going to talk about an overview of the freight system, why we care about the freight system because of its economic importance in the region, an overview of our water and rail networks, and then we'll have time for discussion. So next slide, please. So our freight network is composed of our highway system, comprising about 30,000 miles of roadway, a rail network comprising an additional several thousand miles of facility, 18 active intermodal terminals. We have a marine system with ports, port access to the Great Lakes, the St. Lawrence Seaway, the Mississippi River, and actually beyond that to the intercoastal waterways. Two airports, pipelines serving our region, and within this, 1 billion square feet of industrial development, warehouses, and other freight supportive locations. So next slide. We have about 700 million tons of goods moved each year, worth about $1.2 trillion. That's into, out of, and within the region, not including the through movements. 40,000 trucks per day on some of our roads, particularly, I guess the highest volume road is Interstate 80 as it crosses over into Indiana. 1 in 3 rail cars pass through Illinois. And then in the southwest corner of the region, in Grundy County, we have 15,000 barges that pass that point at Dresden Island, just west of Will County. So major freight facilities, a lot of activity every day in the region. And again, we have 81 freighters on average per day at O'Hare. Next slide. So overall, long term, we have had a lot of growth in our freight industry. Over the past 10 or so years, some of our modes have had a slowing of the growth. So our intermodal terminal counts for last year were no greater than they were in 2015. That's changed this year as the effects of the war have moved some traffic from truck to rail. So we've had a lot more rail activity vis-a-vis the truck volumes. But overall, because we've had things like the slowdown in housing demand, other activity less activity that we have had economically within our region, that's resulted in a slower growth for our freight industry. Nevertheless, we are expecting continued growth for our economy over the next several decades. And our most recent modeling activity indicates a growth of about 38% in our truck VMT between now and 2050, outpacing motor vehicle travel demand growth. So much greater increase in truck VMT and accompanying increases in rail volume and all that sort of stuff too. So next, economy for our region. Again, we are a freight hub, and a lot of the freight industry's jobs are within Northeastern Illinois. Most of the jobs for the freight industry are in the trucking sector. We have one of the largest trucking sectors in the country, both local, serving our stores and shops and that sort of thing, as well as long distance over the road trucking. Rail freight has more than 10,000 employees, and then we have several thousand people involved in the marine, air, and pipeline, kind of smaller modes as far as tonnages, but very, very important. Next. The importance of the freight industry is related to its relationship to our economy. We have a number of trading partners, and we'll go over this a little bit more a little bit later. Both in the Midwest, most trips are shorter, but we also have a lot of activity on the coasts. A lot of that is intermodal, rail, and over-the-road trucking. But again, important for our economy, because we need to be able to, if we're manufacturing things, we need to be able to ship those things. Next, and this next slide will kind of drive that home. So this slide shows on the left the number of tons inbound and outbound for the region. So our outbound tonnages are smaller than the inbound tonnages, right? And the inbound tonnages may include food. It may include the inputs to our manufacturing processes and so forth. But we're a manufacturing center. On the right-hand side shows the value of those goods that are shipped. So the value, again, and these are in millions of dollars, are much greater than the inputs. The outbound trips are much greater in value than the inputs. This is what cities do, right? So and this is why being able to facilitate this freight activity is important for the region, because we get a lot of inputs in, and then the outbound, what we ship, is much greater in value. So next, I think we'll talk about the waterways. We're going to talk about the waterway system, and then the rail system, and we'll come back and talk about trucking at another meeting. But this is our maritime system. On the left is just a map of our waterways. We have 3 port districts in the region, and up in Waukegan, the Illinois International Port District, which technically they have 2 facilities on the south side of Chicago, but it's technically comprised of the entire city of Chicago. And then the Joliet Regional Port District in Will County, which hasn't been active in waterway development, but now has a plan to do so. So there are a lot of facilities, a lot of dams, locks and dams maintained, both in concert with the Water Reclamation District and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And then on the right-hand side, we see volumes of how much freight is carried on our waterways each year. So let's see, next slide. We'll see where they're going. So we have 2 sorts of waterway freight in the region. We have let's see, barges on the left, and those barges, they can use the southern tip of Lake Michigan. So go from, say, our region to Indiana Harbor, and they can make their way all the way down to the Gulf ports, up and down the Illinois and Mississippi River, and then across on the Intracoastal Waterway. So some of the chemicals that are being produced in northeastern Illinois may actually be bound for Texas. So it's an important element of interstate commerce. On the right, we see deep draft vessels, and part of the region's waterways, particularly in the Lake Calumet region, are facilitate deep draft vessels, and those ships can navigate across the Great Lakes and then up and down the St. Lawrence Seaway and off into the North Atlantic Ocean. So two different systems that we have facilitated with our maritime facilities here in Northeastern Illinois. They can't travel between, so you can't take a ship from the Great Lakes and send it down the river. The draft is, it's 9 foot of clearance typically, so it just doesn't work. Likewise, the barges aren't safe to carry across the Great Lakes. So two different systems we've got. Let's talk about some of the problems that face the maritime system. So in that, we have quite a few slides in the work that we have posted for the maritime system on our freight assessment site. You can look at those. We'll have just a highlight ahead. So our waterways need to be dredged because of silt that builds up. Flooding events bring a lot of silt into the waterways. There's also pollution that is left behind because of runoff or littering and so forth. So much of the system is subject to groundings, and groundings are a danger to both the ships themselves, the boats themselves, as well as other people on the waterways. So there is what is called fouling of the waterway of the boats, where the propellers or the rudders may get stuck with litter and debris in the waterways, rendering them unable to be controlled, and then potentially running into other ships, or potentially other like bridges and stuff like that. So dangers, maintenance of the waterways is critical to preventing these incidents and maintaining safety along the waterways, both for the people working on these ships and boats, as well as other people on the waterways. So next, so this is a map of what are called elisions. Bridge elisions are in red on this map. So an elision is where a moving object strikes a fixed object, such as a bridge. We have a number of concentrations of such elisions in the city of Joliet, for example, as well as along Lake Calumet within the city of Chicago, in the Calumet River in the city of Chicago. So the city of Chicago is undergoing several $100 million of bridge improvements to partly to address some of these issues. But a lot of the issues remain. It's a big deal. And the issues in Joliet remain, and you see some of the locations pointed out here. So mobility within the city of Joliet is frequently affected by those bridge issues. So we want to go someplace when I was working on a project down there, and we couldn't get there because the bridge is up in the air. So big deal. Let's see, next, move on to rail. So here is a map of our rail system. The black lines show the current rail system, with active track. The green lines show where Metra, Amtrak, and the South Shore operate their services, and the red lines are most of the abandoned track and out of service track in the region. So some of this has been converted into trails, but a lot of it has simply been reverted back to original owner or sold off. Let's see. Next. So one of the things that we're looking at as we proceed with the freight assessment is the potential information that might be useful for analyzing such things as the proposed merger between Union Pacific and Norfolk Southern. The operations of the rail system are often complex. They are primarily commercial relationships and involve numerous shippers, often multiple railroads, and of course subcontractors that may be operating the intermodal terminals or different parts of the rail system and so forth. So we are in the midst of attempting to put together an information system that will be useful for our partners, our stakeholders, as we talk about things like the proposed merger. So this is an example. So we have rail ownership, but it isn't just rail ownership that we're concerned about with the rail system, because the different rail companies have trackage rights where they can operate their trains on somebody else's tracks, or haulage rights where they assign a train to another carrier for hauling on their tracks. But this map is an example of what we can do, showing the names indicate the name of the owner, as well as what we call the subdivision of the railroad, and then the colors indicate those tracks that have trackage rights for the Union Pacific or Norfolk Southern. So we see that the amount of track that may be, the locations that may be affected by a merger are much greater than those just owned by the merging railroads. So we're also compiling a regional map, and that's back in the corner back there, of a poster map that people can look at. It'll be a PDF. So if you want to know where point K0 is, a tower on the north side, you'll be able to figure that out. And when the Union Pacific says we're going to have more trains from K0 to up into Wisconsin, you'll be able to see where that is. So again, trying to come up with some information that will be useful to our partners. Next. Intermodal truck terminals. We have a number in our region, rail truck terminals. Growth continuing, expected in Will County. Part of the merger process is expected to close more terminals in Cook County. Union Pacific has recently closed a couple terminals there. That trend of consolidation is expected to continue. Next slide. Here's the intermodal terminals, the origins of shipments via intermodal, mostly the coasts, for the origins of these shipments, 2022 data. Next slide, we'll see the destinations. Again, intermodal origins, destinations, long trips oriented toward the coast. So let's talk about manifest trains, carload trains. Next slide. So this is a map depicting the carload freight yards, the classification yards where tanker cars or box cars may be shifted between railroads and among the lines and so forth. So lots of those facilities in the region, many of these dating back more than a century. So next. And we see the origins of those carload freight shipments, often to the north, west. Think about raw materials. Again, north and west primarily, some in the south. But next slide, take a look at the change that we see here. And this is the destinations of those trips. Again, manufactured goods oriented toward other population centers in the southeast and down into Texas. So very, very different orientation of the trips that we've got for our carload versus the intermodal system. So next, and we're just about wrapping up. One of the issues we've got for our freight rail system is the bottlenecks. Some of these are being addressed through CREATE. Others, like the Canal Street Bridge, through the Union Amtrak work. Next. And then we'll be spending a lot of conversation on local impacts, things like at-grade crossings too. So that we see that the highest level of delay, which is mapped here, is in locations, suburban Cook County tends to be where the greatest impacts are, but we have impacts really throughout the region. And I think but we'll be talking about that quite a bit over the next several months as well. So next, and I think that's it. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Tom, for that presentation. Does anyone have any questions? Tom? Audrey?
Is CMAP planning to make any comments on the proposed UP&S merger in terms of the docket, the federal docket?
I would say that we haven't determined that yet. You know, there will be a specific analysis with regard to mitigation strategies. But beyond that, we haven't determined what our final role is. We're going to be working with our partners to determine the best approach and hopefully coming up with a regional approach that is coordinated.
Mary. So Mary with CDOT here. Just if anyone does want to talk about the merger and coordinate on strategy, Chicago's definitely making comments. So I had a question related to that. Tom, have you all attempted to try, the word on the street is if this merger is accepted, right, other railroads will attempt to do the same. Have you all started to think about ways to try and model impacts of the merger?
So our travel demand models really don't get at the impacts of this. We can try to determine what our freight models in particular can pick out, but it's in general. To some extent, we need to rely on industry data because they, primarily, these are commercial transactions and commercial relationships. So we can model things like costs and that sort of thing, but really that's going to be the purview, under the purview of the rail companies. And the rail companies have routinely made changes in their operations, really without any overview. So recently, CSX closed Bar Yard in Blue Island, really without any oversight or any opportunity to for anybody to comment on that. And the impact of that could not have been anticipated because of our lack of understanding of, say, the capacity of clearing yard to take up that work. Now, the city itself has worked with our rail partners in Cook County to do some modeling of the freight system, to understand the impacts of CREATE. This information could be used for analyzing impacts of changes in commercial relationships in the freight industry, but that would have to be, again, within the context of conversations with the rail industry.
Sure. Yeah, we are, if folks are interested to share notes, and we should talk more, Tom, we are, my team is doing such an analysis around the merger. And so I was just curious if we're doubling efforts or not. I also was curious how we can share notes more around the analysis you're doing with this set of data and where you're headed with it next.
Okay. Yeah, and we are planning to do that. So, yeah.
Any other questions for Tom? Amy, and then Brandon.
Thanks, Tom. I know nothing about this. So I just have a really basic question, which is when you showed those conflicts on the waterways and talked about dredging, who's responsible for that? Like, how is that paid for and managed?
So that's primarily the responsibility of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And that's been controversial over the past decade or so as there have been lawsuits preventing the Corps from expanding a facility on Lake Michigan. So there are outstanding questions with regard to that. Some of the dredging doesn't involve hazardous material that doesn't require special locations for disposal. Those can be disposed of more broadly in geographic areas. So some of it is actually put back into the lake and so forth. It's their responsibility to dredge the material. It's their responsibility to find a place to put it. One of the questions that we'll have is, can these relationships be improved so that better planning for dredged materials can take place in the region?
Brandon.
Thank you, Tom, for the presentation. Kind of building off CDOT's comments, a couple quick questions for you. When do you expect this assessment to be complete? And two, are the results going to be in the Century Plan, or are they going to be kind of its own standalone report?
So we are going to have a standalone report. Again, the first couple of parts of this are on the web right now. But it is being integrated into the Century Plan. You'll see some of the stuff in the RTP was really work that we did as part of this effort. Again, we're trying to integrate this into the other work that we do, from the environmental work we do with regard to, say, climate change, all the way to kind of the safety impacts at grade crossings and that sort of stuff. So
okay, perfect. Yeah, we're in the process of starting an update to our state freight plan, and I feel like this would be great. So hopefully you're coordinating. If not,
yes.
I'd like to connect you.
Yeah.
Okay, Thank you, Tom, for an informative presentation. So we've covered transportation, environmental resilience. We've talked about freight and how this is all interconnected and coming together in the Century Plan. So we have Austin Edwards to provide an update on development of CMAP Century Plan. Welcome.
Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Austin Edwards. I'm a senior policy analyst here at CMAP. And although I've been with the agency for 9 years, I can't remember the last time I spoke to TC, so I'm glad to be here. Normally they keep me in the dungeons with the other Cape trolls.
We're happy to see you at the podium last time.
Thank you. Well, I'm excited to be here today to talk about the Century Plan. I'm helping to shepherd this whole of agency project. And many of the topics you've talked about are going to show up in the Century Plan. So what we want to do is sort of give you an overview and talk a little bit about where we're headed this fall, give you a little preview of what we're going to be talking about. Next slide. So just to ground us quickly, I wanted to quickly talk about our approach here. As you are well aware, if you've been with CMAP for long, we normally develop these 500-page comprehensive plans. We're taking a different tack this time. We're proud of the legacy of On to 2050 and Go to 2040 before it, as well as the substantial progress that we've achieved in moving the region's goals forward. But for a variety of reasons, we need to take a more modular, nimble approach this time around. And the times are changing, our planning practice needs to change with them. So what we're doing is preparing a new regional vision called the Century Plan. It will provide high-level policy guidance around what the region needs to achieve over the next 10 to 20 years. And we're working with a variety of partners across government, business, civic spheres, and communities to develop that guidance. And then together, that regional vision will guide the planning activities over the next 10 years. So things like a resilience improvement plan, a freight plan, a housing plan, they can live in their own space, but they're coordinated by one central vision. And then this family of plans will together serve as the region's comprehensive plan. So it's a new tact. I know it's a little confusing. You've already seen it at work with the RTP and the Climate Action Plan. Those are tied to federal requirements. We needed to get them out the door before we could finish the Century Plan. But moving forward, we believe that this will allow us to help serve the region's needs and work with our partners more closely. Next slide, please. So how do we get there? Well, we launched the Century Plan process last fall at CMAP's 20th anniversary event. Many of you were able to join us there. I think it really helped to set a positive, hopeful, engaging tone for this process. Following that, we've developed a number of data trends, done the research analysis that we're well known for, and put that together into the State of the Region report. We'll have copies available after the meeting. It's really a quite flippable sort of magazine of what's going on in our region and how we've changed over the last 10 or 20 years. We've also engaged in strategic foresight by working with a futurist firm out of Toronto, as well as a resource group, to think about what does future uncertainty hold for us? What are the big trends that are going to shape our trajectory into the future? What do we need to be planning for? And then finally, to complement all those more internal research exercises, we've also led a dual engagement process that I'll talk about in a moment that has really helped us to ground our assessments in what communities and stakeholders are already experiencing today. And then across all this work, we're not necessarily trying to develop solutions yet. What we're trying to do is understand the challenges that matter most for the region's future. And we are just now shifting gears into synthesis and mobilization. How do we bring all that insight together and put together a vision that can help lead our collective action into the future? So we're coming around, we're giving you a bit of a preview today. We will be delivering a plan preview report to our board in October that will sort of lay out broadly, here's where we think we're going. If you have any concerns, please raise them now. And then we'll have the full plan ready for adoption a year later in October 2027, following a public comment period. Next slide. So one of the major conclusions of the State of the Regional report is that we have unique strengths that make us stand out nationally and give us a competitive advantage. One of the major findings is that we have all of the assets we need to compete globally, even if we have a number of issues here at home and perhaps are punching below our weight. We have an expansive regional transportation system. We have many assets across transit, freight, and more that you've been talking about this morning. We have a broad regional economy, and we have rich natural resources. And all of this is the result of generations of investment and they're worthy of maintaining and building on. Next slide. Part of that is that all these regional systems underpin a large and diverse economy where people are able to find opportunity and thrive. In 2023, our gross regional product was $742 billion. If we were our own nation, we would be in the top 25, somewhere between Sweden and Ireland. So we have a very large economy, and all of that is built on the systems that you and others across the public sector help to build. And as we look across our peers, many are spending billions of dollars to achieve what we already have in place. Next slide. But of course, we all know that there are problems. And as we look across these trends, there are signs of things that could alter the infrastructure and the services that local communities need. And we also see tensions that may challenge the region's capacity to pursue additional growth. And there are a number of different dynamics that could compromise the region's quality of life. So the report I mentioned earlier, it dives into all of these different trends: cost of living, water supply, housing market, heat vulnerability, flooding, congestion, state of infrastructure, much more. There's a lot of great information in there. I hope you'll take time to look at it. But what we wanted to do today is talk about some of the trends, the themes, the insights that are coming out of this work. Next slide. So one of the things we did was actually take all of those trends, all that data, and bring it down to a local level. We have been working with the councils of governments and the city of Chicago to sort of bring together local staff, bring together local mayors and managers to talk about how regional issues are showing up locally and to hear about what communities are experiencing on the ground. Part of this process was actually sort of sampling. The team collected over 800 local, municipal, and county plans, and then sampled about 100 of them, reviewed them to sort of learn from the great work that's already happening at a local level, and then go back and talk to the mayors and managers and say, like, how are you thinking about these issues locally? What can we learn from? And these have allowed us to test ideas with communities and understand how local leaders are already thinking about future challenges. So thank you to all of you who were able to help us bring together those conversations. Next slide. Just to give you a sample of what we've learned, this is a scatter chart that it sort of shows the compiled reactions that people had in some of those workshops. We asked participants to evaluate a series of future drivers of change. So these are some of those lessons that we learned about working with the futurists. And specifically, we asked them to think about which issues would have the greatest impact on their communities, but would also be the most difficult to address locally. And some really clear themes are already coming through that I think they're a really good story for planners like us. One of them is that there's an immediate pressure around rising costs. I think we all hear about that every day. We all feel it personally every day. But there are also longer run challenges around infrastructure condition and severe weather. Another thing we sort of a little bit surprising to me, but was really heartening, is that there's a deep concern around public perception and public trust. It's really heartening to see how much attention our mayors and managers and local planners give to the need for third spaces, how to expand public engagement, how to bring a new generation of residents into public life. And it's also something that while they feel that it has a pretty large impact moving forward, it's also something where local government, regional coordination can help sort of make improvements. Next slide. We also asked participants to think about what is most limiting communities' ability to achieve their goals, whatever their goals may be. Not surprising, funding is a pretty common response. I think we all deal with limited funding every day. But you also see things across the need for coordination, thinking about regulation, again, public trust coming forward, as well as their organizational capacity. And I think in particular here, public sentiment and trust was outweighing some of the things that we've heard historically around the need for local capacity and having to deal with competing priorities. So again, what is the role of regional planning, local planning, the processes that we manage to sort of improve public sentiment and demonstrate that government can deliver high quality services and infrastructure? Across all of these conversations, we heard that many of the challenges that communities are facing are extending beyond local control. And so therefore, what can we as a region be doing together to achieve more on behalf of our residents? Next slide. I want to quickly run through a couple of the themes that we've heard, not just in these conversations, but across all the work that we've done so far. One is not going to be particularly surprising for this group, is that our infrastructure systems need serious investment. You've been thinking about this for a long time, and you're deep in the technical process of thinking about how to manage it. But what we're seeing is that more and more stakeholders are coming to the table with concerns about the major infrastructure systems that we rely on every day. Next slide. Through the RTP process, you've heard a much better discussion about the pressures on our transportation system than I can provide. But what we're seeing is that there's a growing recognition across sort of civic tables, across business and other spaces, that there's a lot of work ahead of us to renew the infrastructure that we rely on, and that there's a pretty large bill coming due in order to be able to pay for that. So here we just have a quick chart about the region's bridges and how more and more of them are slipping out of good condition. And we also know that a quarter of our transit assets are beyond their useful life. Of course, there's also the surge in construction costs and inflation that make all of this work harder. You're very aware of these dynamics. And so as we think about some of the themes in the RTP, the Regional Transportation Plan, the need to look at both sides of the ledger of transportation investment, both generating more revenues, but also thinking about our obligations. We know that there's a need to be more innovative and more effective in how we prioritize our investments, how we make the most of every dollar, and how we deliver projects. So you've been deep in this weeds, and we've been carrying that message on to other audiences. Next slide. We've also been hearing stakeholders increasingly talk about the electric grid and how to help communities understand and shape their energy future. It's becoming clear from our conversations that the region needs to engage more readily in this space. It's something that we're all going to need to learn a lot more about going forward. And there are really two main pieces here. First is really focused on economic development. We need to enable the electricity that connects new commercial and industrial users or new housing developments to the grid. We also need to take for a long time, we've taken reliability of the electric power for granted. But as we look forward, an increasing number of businesses are viewing electricity as the critical resource for future growth, even over things like talent or transportation that we're more used to hearing about. At the same time, we also need to provide ample power to enable climate action. It's important that we electrify our vehicle fleet, both personal vehicles as well as freight, and to reduce emissions from buildings through heat pumps and other green technologies. Just as one example, more than a third of freight trucks, carriers expect to be operating an electric truck within the next 10 years. So this is coming. We all need to be prepared for it. It's also something that we haven't necessarily engaged with directly as transportation and land use planners, but it's going to be an important factor moving forward. Next slide. Similarly, our water supply and drinking water infrastructure remains another area of major concern. A major issue around sort of managing the increasing amount of stormwater in the region, something you were talking about earlier. And so it's sort of slightly ironic position of not having enough water in the right places in the right quality that we need, but also having too much of the wrong water in the wrong places. And so on the drinking water side, our system is facing compounding pressures. We're very aware that there's sort of fragmented governance across more than 200 local water systems. There's increasing demand from the data centers that seem to be dominating everyone's news feeds. But there's also a limited Lake Michigan allocation. So while we have this sense of abundance when it comes to water, when it actually gets down to the nitty-gritty of shifting more communities off of depleted groundwater onto Lake Michigan, we know that it's going to be important for us to coordinate more going forward. Another key takeaway from our discussions is that smaller water systems are not necessarily efficient at delivering water to people. They have fewer staff, they have smaller capital budgets, they often have more pipe per customer that they need to deal with. And so they face a higher likelihood of catastrophic failure. And as we look across the region, more than 90% of our water systems fall below the sort of critical size threshold that research shows some of these issues start to increase. At the same time, as you were mentioning earlier, our stormwater infrastructure remains undersized. And I don't think I need to belabor that point based on the great conversation you had earlier. But as we look forward, a lot of this has to do with the public roadways because so much of it runs alongside our stormwater infrastructure. But there's a lot more to the story, and we need to sort of unpack how we deal with this at a regional level. And I won't be highlighting it much today, but we're also looking at at open space, at natural lands. They give us access to recreation, but also the resilience pieces that you were mentioning earlier, and also, give communities pride of place and community character. Next slide, please. Another major theme that has come out is really focusing on the opportunity for action. If we can come together around the important issues that are shaping our region's trajectory, regional coordination can help us seize opportunities that are in front of us, but part of it has to do with whether or not we can work together around shared goals in order to accomplish more than we can do individually. Next slide. So again, picking up on some of the themes you've heard about through the regional transportation plan, we're trying to think about the structure of regional growth. How do we develop strategically? And the question here, the tension is really, how do we accommodate new investment and development while balancing the landscape and quality of life that have defined the region? And so, as I mentioned earlier, we're thinking about conservation, green spaces, but also infill development. How do we continue to shape our future obligations in terms of infrastructure while continuing to meet local goals? And this is, of course, an inherently regional conversation, so we're hoping to bring it into the Century Plan. Next slide. At the same time, stakeholders are also very aware that this is a time of rapid change. There are a lot of opportunities in front of us. These are some recent headlines that sort of talk about the development pressures of new data centers, but also the state's investment in the new quantum campus and the opportunities that come along with that. There's also an NSF grant that's really endorsing the region's potential to lead the blue economy around water technology. And so we know that these are all great opportunities ahead of us as we continue to see our economy transform, but they also bring new demands, thinking about substantially more energy, the need for more water, different kinds of workers, and more infrastructure improvements. And so the question is, how do we position the region to not only benefit from these shifts, but also manage some of the trade-offs that they may require? Next slide. To put a sort of finer point on the conversation, here are just a couple of quotes from the discussions we've been having throughout the year. These comments really capture something about the regional process that we've heard repeatedly. And the question is, how do we think about positioning assets globally, but then also managing this sort of inflection point that the region is facing? And so we see a need for greater regional coordination moving forward, as well as shared action. And that's really the sort of headspace that we want to keep the Century Plan. Next slide. And so as we think about how to organize for impact, one way to think about it is through this T. We need more alignment horizontally across sectors, including government, business, universities, philanthropy, et cetera. But then we also need to be thinking at multiple scales. So understanding our national agenda, partnering with the state, coordinating local strategies. And this is really about how do we find new ways of thinking and working together in order to build more and better than transformational change than we can do individually. Next slide. In that spirit, as I mentioned earlier, we've been hosting a number of really exciting events around the region. These are mostly focused on trying to convene different voices and different types of people around the major forces shaping the region's future. We've worked hard to get more people into the space, people who are perhaps not our most frequent collaborators, and to hear different perspectives from around the region. And part of that is really looking at a consistent set of questions that our partners are bringing up around infrastructure condition, growth, competitiveness, coordination, some of the things I've been mentioning throughout the talk today. So far, we've hosted an event in Lake County focused on housing development, another event in Oswego around industrial land development. We had a great celebration here at the old post office to celebrate the adoption of the Climate Action Plan. And we had a great conversation around safeguarding our Great Lakes advantage. We will also, I should mention, I don't have a QR code for it yet. We'll be having another event in McHenry County in September focused on conservation and open space. We hope some of you can join us. Next slide. In particular, a few weeks ago, we had a really fabulous event down at Joliet, at the Joliet Historical Museum. I think some of you were able to be there, where we picked up on the call to action that is in the Regional Transportation Plan and brought those messages to new audiences and new civic spaces. This was really a future-focused conversation about investing in our transportation system. And it was not only the need for reinvestment, but also the role of regional collaboration and shared strategies in helping us move beyond the status quo. And so particularly we're able to look at different contexts as we think about, say, everything from major urban expressways and heavy transit down to country roads and everything in between, and how we think about our transportation system. Next slide. So some of the key takeaways from that event. First is that the connection between how we pay for our roads and how we use our roads is continuing to evolve. We need to modernize the transportation system as well as transportation revenue at a regional scale and support these efforts through coalition building and regional collaboration. And second, we're entering a new generation of transportation characterized by emerging technologies, rising costs, and climate challenges. And so we need to think boldly about how we invest in the transportation system for the next century and how to align that investment with our housing strategies, our economic strategies, climate action, and so forth. And then finally, that land use strategies is a critical consideration here. You know, how we grow, where we grow has fiscal impacts, and building where communities already have infrastructure has pretty large economic benefits. Next slide. So to summarize, where we've been over the last 8 or 9 months, we've seen a pretty consistent set of long-term shared challenges sort of rising to the surface. And these are what we are hoping to build the Century Plan around. It's looking at investing in our transportation assets, as I've said multiple times, modernizing governance of our water systems, improving our electric grid to enable both economic development, but then also climate action, supporting the market to deliver more housing supply, particularly housing supply that meets different people's needs and different people's budgets, and preserving land and natural resources for conservation, recreation, and resilience. And so these themes have appeared again and again across all of the engagement activities we've had, all of the sectors we've talked with, the geographies we've been in, and we're really excited to continue to evolve the plan around those ideas. Next slide. And so we have a couple of questions for you. We want to hear about what resonates with the work you're already doing. What struck you from the events you've been able to attend with us, and where do we think is the most important issues for us to tackle together as a region? And otherwise, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have around the climate of the Century Plan.
Thank you, Austin. Any questions from the committee? Audrey.
So not a direct answer to the slide, but I think we have seen in the RTP and here that there are a lot of trends that are very concerning in this region. And I wanted to ask specifically if we are going to be starting to commit to specific policy actions. I think we hear a lot. We need to align the way we raise money for our transportation system. We've been saying that since the 2040 regional plan. And we have not, I think, made some very aggressive policy decisions that are required to do that. And if we don't do that soon, I think we're going to have some serious problems. For example, we see in the RTP that on the unconstrained list of projects, there's like 6 highway reconstructions. We don't even have money to reconstruct our highways. So I wanted to ask if the Century Plan will start to establish policies. Like a couple examples could be, and I know we've talked about them, there is the Interstate System Reconstruction and Rehabilitation Pilot Program at the federal level that allows a select number of states to toll interstate highways to pay for reconstruction. Is our state going to apply to do that? That's been around for a while. We would be eligible. We need to do things like that. Or secondly, CMAP has established its as part of the RTP, it's congestion relief ladder. Like you're supposed to do these 5 things before you expand the roadway system, but there's no requirement that that be used before projects enter the project consideration cycle. So anyway, just wondering to what extent the Century Plan or the RTP plans to establish some like really specific policies that need to get achieved.
That's a great question. I think it goes really to the heart of why we're taking this new approach, right? We are proud of the legacy of On 2050 and Go to 2040, but at the same time, we realize that we need to be more responsive to funding opportunities. We need to be able to be more nimble in how we work with coalitions in order to go after some like really strategic bets. And so the hope here is that the Century Plan is putting a lot of front end effort into how do we get alignment around the major challenges. How are we thinking about them? How are we framing them? put some stakes in the ground, and then allow some of the deeper dive technical conversations to take place, so that we're not necessarily having to have a major expressway conversation at the same time we're trying to have a major housing conversation, at the same time we're trying to have a major climate action conversation. And so I think what this allows us to do moving forward is establish those first principles up front, and then think about, okay, what needs to move more quickly, what is making plenty of progress on its own timeline, where do we need to adjust course and be more responsive to some of the opportunities in front of us. So I don't think that the Century Plan itself is going to be adopting those policies directly in the plan, but we think this is a helpful tool in helping us to sort of manage the very complex, dynamic process of getting this region to come to a consensus and move forward. I hope that answers your question.
Mary has a question for you.
Yeah, thank you. Very interesting presentation, Mary, with CDOT. So, the electric grid there's so many layers to it, right? And I know that there are various climate organizations and advocates in the state who've been doing a lot of thinking and working with the governor's office to try and come up with some structural solutions. CMAP did a great job with the part report, your analysis around NEDA, and that got us to where we are now. So it was to your question of what resonates, I think it'd be amazing to figure out how CMAP could use some of its analytical resources to help that effort out, because there's such a big transportation component to it as well. How can we really solve some of the structural problems that we face with our regional power sources and all the various politics and agencies that are involved there? Thank you.
It's really helpful to hear. It's a new space for CMAP. It's not something that we've really worked on before in the past, although it touches on so many of the issues we care about. And so we're all on a little bit of a learning journey here. And one of the things we found is that there are some really important location-dependent, spatially sensitive issues that come to how the physics of the electrical grid work. And so as we think about what CMAP's role going forward might look like, there's a lot of very high politics around, say, our generation portfolio and the work that the governor's office is thinking about relative to, say, PJM. Those are not necessarily the spaces that CMAP is going to be the biggest help. But when we think about how do we actually deploy the infrastructure that we need in a context-sensitive way in the communities that need more power, that are trying to electrify, that might be a space that I think CMAP can bring some convening, some data, some resources, some technical assistance, and think about how we can accelerate the clean energy transition moving forward.
Building off of Audrey's comments, Austin, I thought in terms of what resonates with me, obviously as chair of Transportation Committee, I'm very interested in transportation assets. But you mentioned that the Northeastern Illinois GDP is between Sweden and Ireland. And what was also compelling was the condition, as an example, in the bridge condition, right? So using city of Chicago, for example, right? I mean, Mary, you guys have over 300 bridges, more movable bridges than anywhere in the world. The state of Illinois, thanks to the governor's leadership, we had the Rebuild Illinois capital bill. And everyone at this table benefited from it. And if there's one thing that I know Cook County learned, we could use that again and more because of the level of investment needed in what we have in the infrastructure we currently own. So I'm curious in terms of benchmarking, right? If we're between Sweden and Ireland in terms of, our GDP and where we sit in terms of our economic activity, where do we stand in terms of, is there any sort of proportional investment in our transportation infrastructure to support that? Where are we falling? We see where we fall in a line, internationally in terms of GDP, but what can we measure against in terms of a proportionate impact, understanding that those are connected issues?
That's a great question. I'll have to defer to some of my colleagues on the actual numbers, but I do think that it raises an interesting point where, let's go back to sort of the conversation we're having around public sentiment, public trust. There have been some serious betrayals of public trust here in Illinois. We know that history, and when we go back to the legislature or to the voters to ask for more resources, that needs to go hand in hand with the reforms that allow us to make more of the money that we have. And so trying to think about that at a regional scale, say what's the agenda of things that we need to be knocking out over the next 10 years, and what are the reforms, the governance changes, the funding requirements that are going to help us to do that, and try to put that forward in a way that says, like, we are going to not have the entire 500-page comprehensive plan, but we're going to put forward a select list of promises, and we're going to deliver on those promises and earn the public's trust to then get the resources we need moving forward.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments for Austin? Christina?
Part of that GDP that you're talking about comes from the farmers in the region. And while your set of priorities seem to resonate very well in the urban areas, there is a distinct lack of consideration in these priorities for our rural communities, which are also part of this region. So my concern is that we're talking about preservation of land and natural resources for conservation and recreation, but I have centennial farmers that are under pressure. So there needs to be that brought into this as well, because they bring a lot to this table in this region. And for a lot of years, it seems like this organization has kind of put blinders on to anybody outside of the urban area. And with almost 2/3 of my community in a rural area, it's kind of hard to go back to my workspace and explain to them why CMAP's not actually looking at the issues that are important to them.
Absolutely. Thank you for that note. I should say that we're early on in this process, and we are thinking about how to include not just natural lands, but also working lands as part of that conservation effort, because we know that our agricultural lands are under severe pressure from land costs, from new data centers, warehousing, solar projects that are important to our economy, but also put our community character at risk. And so trying to think about how do we balance all of that and develop strategically as a region is hopefully part of the picture. But thank you.
Heather?
Hi, Heather Mullins from the Regional Transportation Authority. CMAP is undertaking this plan at a time when our transit agencies are also going through a very significant but also very positive direction. We have finally the money we need to make a lot of these changes, improvements to the transit system, but also more authority and ability to do more things than we ever had in the past. So I think that's something positive to look at as we move into this. But also looking at how all those positive things can be incorporated into this plan. It's not just the transportation system and the transit system, but we also have unprecedented authority to do more things with land use and with housing. We're already starting to take on some of those things and start to work through that. I mean, it's going to take years for us to fully transition to NEDA, but I don't think it will take years for the region to start seeing the benefits of that. So I think that's something that's going to be very important putting together this plan.
Clearly agree. We're sort of leaning on the model of the success of that transit reform, sort of thinking about how do we bring coalitions together and go to the state or to the federal government with more concerted, organized, or regional agenda.
Okay, I have one more comment for you, Austin. And this is something that I think all of urban or rural, all of us counties have as a challenge is in terms of we had a Tom's presentation, we've had your presentation, and we know that that freight and is a core part of our economic competitiveness, right? And there are redevelopment efforts, right? And there's a warehouse going up, right? But before the confetti even falls to the ground, then we're working with residents on the impacts of the trucks going through their communities. And so how do we work with both in promoting more livable spaces? Do we give trucks where to go? You know, I think that ends up being a challenge for all of us in terms of we see the trucks and the freight trains as part of our economic engine. Motorists don't see it that way. Commuters don't see it that way. And there's a tension there, right? So how do we enhance that, but also promote those livable spaces. So, and what tools as implementers do we have in our toolbox, whether it's giving designated truck routes, or for example, something for us to contemplate.
That's a great note.
Thank you. Okay, we like this topic too, Austin. Thank you for coming.
Or I'll be available afterwards if there are any more questions.
Okay. So moving on to other business, is there any other business that committee members would like to bring forward? Okay, seeing none, we are going to move on to the public comment part of our meeting. It is 11:17. So we went long. Vicky. Okay. So there have not been any comments from in-person attendees submitted ahead of time. Is there anyone in the audience that that is here to provide comments? Okay. So, pardon? Okay. Okay. So, the next, going in order here. So comments from virtual attendees via Zoom submitted ahead of time is what is coming next. And we have none. I'm gonna keep scratching out here. Okay,
You forgot it's Garland Armstrong who had his hand raised.
we're getting to you, Garland. Our friends at CMAP are trying to keep this, keep me together here, and I have a list in an order in which we're supposed to go through the comments. So I think we've gotten through everybody in the room, and then someone could have submitted a written comment in advance. And then I think now we're at the time where we can call on those that have had their hand raised or submitted their name. Right, Vicki? Okay. Thank you for your help.
Garland, you may begin.
Thanks, Tara. How everyone in the Chicagoland area doing? We
We're
missed
doing
y'all.
good.
Yep.
Thank you. We got Lollapalooza today.
Yeah, I know. And formerly of Elmwood Park and Des Plaines, now living in Des Moines, Iowa. I put a chat in there about that when you was talking to Tom for the freight thing and making sure that the passengers, especially he forgot about the BNSF, because sometimes when I used to live in Elmwood Park, I used to take the commuter train there, but sometimes the freight trains always holds up because when they're going in the freight yard, especially by Cicero Berwyn section, it would cause a whole lot going in there. But I want to make sure that, and those who have to wait, especially the pace buses, they're either in Berwyn or Berwyn because they really get frustrated, especially when those freight trains have to going in the rail yard or leaving the rail yard. That's my biggest concern on that. And also, too, I want to make sure that CTA and PACE to make sure you heard about one time there was teenagers doing the surfing on the train, and also make sure Metra doesn't have that too. And I want to give kudos to Metra concerning they have drones, but make sure to have drones so if anybody who tries to want to surf on a commuter train or on the city trains or even get on buses, make sure you have enough drones because you don't know what the teenagers will be thinking of next online, especially using the platform to do that because they don't care about either getting hurt or being killed or something like that. So you got to make sure to educate those from all different languages because they really don't understand the seriousness of danger of doing surfing on top of a bus or a train because they really think it will never affect them, but only time will tell. When one incident happens like that, that's it. The damage of them will be done and it will cause a whole major live delay. So make sure Metro and Pace and CTA, make sure you have so much drones on there to make sure that those teenagers will not try and surf on top of any of them because they really have no idea that they're going to watch on there. So make sure you do that for our concern and for the safety, and also communicate with the parents who do not speak clear English about that too, because God forbid they really don't want to hear it. Well, they'll be held one day they'll probably say they'll be held accountable for it. So make sure you educate those parents too to tell them about it, because that's the top priority for it. And we don't want this to happen again in the Chicagoland area. So
Thank you for your comments, Garland.
Yeah.
And please send our best to Heather. And we hope that you enjoy the late summer here. And we look forward to seeing you and hearing from you in September.
Yeah, and also making sure that the ADA will understand this too. So when y'all have this again for like a town hall meeting, make sure the disability communities too get involved. So what they have suggestions too to be a part of it. So that's always a top priority for them too, because they want to be seeing what's going on in reality, because they have no clue and no idea what's going to be happening next. So make sure you get an outreach to them all, because they want to be a part of society and not to be disconnected from it.
Will do, Garland. Thank you.
All right.
Say that again.
John Paul Jones, you may begin.
Thank you.
And for-
Good morning to everyone. This presentation today was beautiful. All the speakers did a great job in giving us some good direction of how we can proceed into 2027 to complete not only the regional plans, but also the century plan. But I wanted to touch on the freight report. I work with both not only Grow Greater Inglewood, but also with Sustainable Inglewood Initiatives. And I know the CRATE program has been an impact on our community since the early, late 1900s. And so we wanted to keep a focus on that. And as you shared in your freight report, that the Norfolk Southern and the Union Pacific merger will impact us a great deal. And it will also impact the CRATE strategies. In the report, it did show that the 63rd and Norfolk Southern site is scheduled to close. And I think they may mention, I wasn't sure if that map showed if it was a Union Pacific location that's along the Red Line extension. I believe that was the location that was in there. Again, both of those are regional impacts. And what we discovered with the CXX shutdown of their Blue Island site, it was a surprise. Like the gentleman from CMAP indicated how they were surprised about that freight yard closing. We had to get a handle on how we deal with freight in the region, and we already know Metra has had his different conversations for years with Union Pacific. So we're hoping that this merger will also deal with how Union Pacific will show greater care working alongside Metra. But it will require CMAP to be a part of those conversations, and also in supporting Metra's in any way possible going forward. We're excited about the NEA initiative. We've been communicating a great deal with the board members there about what we hope to see in terms of improvements to our transportation systems, but also how they too must be involved with the Metro conversation, support them as much as they can in this negotiation with Union Pacific. But I'm hoping that we can really elevate freight strategies within the century plan. I think the moment is now to really bring those things together. And also the moment is now to see if we can kind of show up any kind of report that we can generate, not only now, but even later on with the century plan, that can add value to the conversations going on both in the city of Chicago and with us in Inglewood about how we should anticipate the impacts from the merger that is scheduled to occur this upcoming year. And so I just want to bring attention to that. And also just want to encourage also, if we could go back to the TA assistance that is scheduled on the CMAP for some of those suburban communities, if they can go the extra mile to possibly use this moment to further assist the South suburban community when it comes to stormwater management strategies. I think one or two communities were scheduled for some TA this year. I wasn't sure if they was on the stormwater, but we may want to at least figure out a way to work with the state if they can give you more money to do a special review of what really happened with this most recent tornado impact. And as much as we can get to both the green infrastructure and the green infrastructure strategies that the social suburban communities need, so they can have a good capital plan going into 2027 that can convince the state to do more for the South suburban community. So I just want to just raise those up tonight, today, and looking forward to more conversations and working with your network. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, John Paul. Especially those ones on freight. Again, how do we support but yet also mitigate those impacts to our region? Vicky, do we have any more, anyone? So if you are online, please do notify staff by raising the hand function, and staff will identify you before addressing the committee. Do we have anyone?
I think that it wraps up public comment.
Okay. Okay, this concludes the public comment period. So agenda item 9.0, the next meeting is scheduled for September 11th here at CMAP. Change is coming, but please come back here on September 11th. And as a reminder, because of the renovations, November 18th will be at CTA's boardroom, and December 20th meeting, you can come to the Cook County building and maybe go to the Chris Crindle Market after. And that'll be in our county building. So please do enjoy the rest of your summer because we head into the fall the next time we convene. So seeing no other business before the committee, do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved, McHenry.
Thanks, Scott. Do I have a second? Thank you, Heather. All right, the motion carries and this meeting is adjourned on time. On time, 11:28, everyone. Thank you.